Center for the Study of World Religions, Harvard Divinity School.
Good afternoon and welcome to our Gnosologies event. My name is Giovanna Parmigiani and I am the host of this series organized within the Transcendence and Transformation Initiative at the CSWR here at Harvard Divinity School. This series focuses on ways of knowing that are often labeled as non-rational. Traditionally referred to as gnosis in Western philosophical and religious traditions, and often understood in contraposition to science, these ways of knowing are becoming more and more influential in contemporary societies, popular culture, and academic research. What is the place of spirit possession, divination, and experiences perceived as out of the ordinary in our lives? How can we study and approach this type of phenomena? Going beyond dichotomies such as body and mind, ordinary and extraordinary, reason and experience, and matter and spirit, this series hosts scholars of different disciplines and practitioners interested in exploring and expanding the boundaries of what counts as knowledge today. Today, I'm here with Citalin Sanchez, one of our former students here at HDS. Citalin is a Masewal illustration artist, ceremonial dancer, and research assistant at the Moses Mesoamerican Archives and Research Project. Citalin's research and art practice explore the intersection between the natural world, the sacred, and the arts among indigenous populations in the Americas. Thank you very much, Citalin, for being here with us today. So today it is with great pleasure that we introduce you and welcome today's guest, Anna Mariella Bacigalupo. Anna Mariella is a professor of anthropology at the State University of New York in Buffalo. She works with indigenous Mapuche in Chile and pan-indigenous communities in Northern Peru. Her recent book includes Thunder Shaman, Making History with Mapuche Spirits in Patagonia, Shamans of the Foyer Tree, Gender, Power, and Healing among the Chilean Mapuche, and The Voice of the Drum in Modernity, Tradition and Change in the Practice of 7 Mapuche Shamans. Professor Bacigalupo is currently a fellow at the National Humanities Center, writing a new book titled The Subversive Politics of Sentient Land, Collective Ethics and Climate Justice in Northern Peru. She also co-edited Subversive Religiosities and More Than Human Materialities in Latin America. Bacigalupo's research has been funded by the John Simon Guggenheim Foundation, the Max Planck Institute, the Radcliffe Institute for Advanced Study, the National Endowment for the Humanities, the National Humanities Centers, the School of Advanced Research, the Rockefeller Foundation, the Stanford Humanities Centers, the Netherlands Institutes for Advanced Study, the Fulbright Foundation, and the Werner Grant Foundation, and finally, the International Association of University Women. Welcome, Mariella. Thank you for being with us. We are so happy to have you here.
Thank you. Thank you for inviting me today. I really appreciate it.
I have been looking forward to this conversation for a long time, I have to say. So finally it's here. I'm thrilled. And just to mention, today we will discuss the implications of our climate crisis. What happens if we truly decenter the human, and what we will learn, how sentient landscape might define and advocate for collective ethics and climate justice, what kind of post-apocalyptic vision could trigger a moral responsibility toward the earth. So before touching on these wonderful topics, I'd like, as always, to start with, background question. We like, stories. And so I'm very curious to know, how did you get interested in anthropology, first of all?
Oh, thank you for that question. Well, my interest in anthropology really began with my close relationships with indigenous Mapuche in southern Chile. And can you see the screen now? Do you see the photos? Yes, okay. So what happens is my maternal grandparents in Patagonia, in Argentina, had a hop farm and an apple farm, and my grandfather's partner on that farm was a Mapuche indigenous man, his work partner, and they worked together on the land. And every summer when I was there, the Mapuche man, whose name was Virginio Ancao, would bring his relatives and friends from Chile to Argentina to work on the harvest. So I worked on the harvest with them from a very long time, since I was a child. So every summer since the day I was born, and this is actually me over here, the baby, on the farm. So I went at a very young age. When at a very young age, I learned to sort of appreciate a very interesting and novel way, a Mapuche way of thinking about their relationship to the earth. A very profound kind of reflexivity, a preoccupation with voice and expression. Their deep knowledge about the forces of the lakes and the earth and healing. Which really expanded my categories of understanding and what I learned in school in Chile. And this later on led to my anthropological interest, in shamans and healing and in sentient landscapes, and also how they might, advance ideas of healing and environmental justice. I mean, it was a really profound kind of rethinking of categories and so on that I learned at this very young age, and which clashed a lot with what I was learning in Catholic school in Lima while I was a child. When my grandfather passed away, I was very heartbroken. And the brother of Virginio Ancao, Eulalio Ancao, who was a community chief over here in Chile, he said, well, you no longer have a grandfather, but I'm your grandfather now, and you have land in Chile, and we are family. We've seen you growing up since you were a child and so on. And this is very, important for us to continue working with you and being with you and so on. And so even though when I was a child, we lived in Peru, Colombia, and then Chile, every summer we would be back in Argentina and Patagonia. And then when we moved to Chile, it was wonderful because I could go and see, Eulalio and his family very, very easily. One of the things that happened when I moved to Chile, first of all, it was Pinochet's military dictatorship, which was a very difficult time. And there was a lot of experiences of, terror and suffering and violence, right, during that time, which necessitated the production of the healing of shamans and so on. But it was also at the time there was a lot of discrimination against Peruvians. So coming from Peru was also a very difficult experience, during that time in Chile. And I decided when I was in Chile during the dictatorship to study history. It was one of the professions that was still available at the time. A lot of the anthropologists had either been killed or had fled the country at the time. And as I was a historian and studying history, I began to realize the silences in terms of power and politics that were in the archive. The silences in terms of understanding Mapuche ethos, their politics, their ideas of power, and so on. And they really didn't do justice to the things that I learned outside of the archive, outside of class, and so on. And by then I had also begun to learn about anthropology. I read a number of anthropological texts, and I thought that maybe the methods and kind of theories, used by anthropologists in some ways were more akin to what I was interested in as an anthropology. And so I went to talk to Eulalio, who we see here. He was also the butcher of the town, aside from having, he was the butcher, but he also had lands. And so I told him about this, and I said, it's not really working for me, the archive, and I know it's really difficult for me to find things. I mean, I find a lot about the sort of biases and the ways in which, the Spaniards and the Chileans read, Mapuche realities, but it doesn't really give me what I need. And he sat me down in his kitchen. I'll never forget this, a smoky kitchen with chili peppers hanging there and sausages that he had just made. And he said to me, very softly, he says, I don't know how to tell you this in a soft way. We love you very much and you are family to us. But as a historian working with documents made by landlords and the police, you're useless to us. He says, why don't you become an anthropologist so you can write our stories our way? And so I thought about this and I took his suggestions to heart. And after completing my degree in history, I went to UCLA and got my PhD in anthropology under Johannes Wilbert, who was studying shamans in Venezuela and other places, and who's very well known for working with shamanism. So then I returned to Chile and started living with Eulalio and his wife and children and conducting research with Mapuche, particularly with the shamans. And when I returned to Chile, I mean, it's also my Mapuche family. This is me over here, right? I participate in the rituals. I'm part of that spiritual landscape of volcanoes and lakes that have power. I also served as a ritual assistant and learn to play sleigh bells and rattles and so on, and also be part of their life in politics. And it is through Euladio that I met a network of friends and family that introduced me to where I began to do my work with Mapuche, and all the 3 books I've written on Mapuche shamanism, or rather Mapuche shamanism as a lens through which to understand the world, right? And understand ideas of politics and power, because it's not just shamanism per se. Shamanism is actually a frame for understanding the world from a different point of view. So that's how I began to be interested in anthropology.
Thank you for sharing this story with us. It's always so important to, see the faces and recognize the important figures that, led us to be here where we are. So thank you. We honor you and all the person you presented introducing this story. Then how did you get interested in Peru?
Well, I was born in Peru. This is my father right here. This is me when I was a child with my siblings, and this is my great aunt Teresa here on the right. I was born in Peru in the chaotic capital of Peru, which is Lima. And every Saturday we would go to my Aunt Teresa's house. Here she is, actually holding me in her arms. She was my godmother. And Teresa was a very religious woman. In a very complex way. Her sitting room was populated by saints of various kinds, a gory picture of Jesus, but also a number of medicinal plants and so on. She used to she taught me, she believed in the powers of ancestor mountains, and she taught me how to feed them with canchita, which is this maize that you make and so on. She tied red yarn to my arms and ankles to protect me from evil spirits and protect me from the evil eye. She healed neighbors from susto and empacho and a number of local illnesses and gave them medicinal plants. Even my father, who was sometimes resistant to that, used to go around the back at night and get medicinal plants from her, as everybody did in the neighborhood. And one of the things with Teresa is that she also taught me what it meant to be she lived in Barrios Altos, which is a very poor neighborhood of migrant Quechua and Black Afro-Peruvians living there. It was a neighborhood full of migrants. It was also a place where there was a lot of cars being stolen. There was a lot of crime in that area. And one of the things that really struck me was the way in which Teresa's role, as she was a single mother and also a healer, the way in which the discourses in Peru at that time both recognized her power on the one hand and her ability to heal, but also the way in which this sort of patriarchal Catholic society also made her suffer in a class, because she was a low class, because she was indigenous, because they accused her of being a witch sometimes, because for not fitting into sort of more mainstream notions. And so really, that was one of the things that I told my aunt. I said, Teresa, I'm going to defend you. It was what I tell her when I was small. I'm going to defend you and your ways of being in the world. And that's what I think I have done in my life project and the books I wrote much later in life, The Voice of the Drum of Modernity, the one about, gender, power, and healing among Mapuche, was also inspired in great part by Teresa and her extraordinary ability to move out of, poverty and also be generous and with her community and healing, despite all the pressures that were, affected her. And then many years later, we moved to Chile, and I was working with Mapuche, with whom I have a close relationship from my mother's side of the family. Many years later, in 2015, an anthropologist called Douglas Sharon invited me to join him on a project by the National Institute of Health, teaching minority U.S. students to do research on healing. and he had medicinal plants in northern Peru, and he needed help with that. So I was happy to go and work with him. And in the process of this project, I met Ombayek. Ombayek was this is Ombayek's altar, by the way, which is in some sense him as well. This is the way in which he relates to sentient mountains, right? This is his relationship to sentient mountains. This is his altar, his powers over here. And Ombayek was a very extraordinary man. Ombayek means a guardian of the water. He was known for his healing powers and also his predictions of floods and rains and so on, which are prevalent in northern Peru. You have dry desert and then torrential rains produced by El Nino, but exacerbated by climate change. And Ombayek was very aware of this, the way in which climate change was really affecting this in northern Peru. And in 2014, he and other shamans participated in the founding of two movements for collective ethics and climate justice, led by Apu Campana, which Apu is a name for a mountain ancestor. And he really was really important in thinking about how these things came together, climate change and ancestor mountains, and how we need to rethink our values and our morality, and the ancestor mountains really being leaders in this idea. And when Ombayek learned that I was from Lima, but that my family had also was indigenous Quechua in part, and that I'd been doing work with shamans with Mapuche for many years, he asked me to come with him and participate on a ritual on Mountain Culicote, which is where I'm here. And he tested me. He was like telling me, can you feel the forces of the winds? What does this tell you? What does that sound mean to you? And so on. So see if we were working within the same kind of forces. And after that ritual, Ombayek asked me to work with him as his ritual assistant and also to write a book. He said he wanted me to write about his entanglements with Apu, these mountain ancestors, and their politics, which are crucial to addressing the climate crisis. And he thought that, one of the things that I could do, because I had this knowledge about these indigenous healing systems and I was part of them, yet at the same time, I was an academic and I could write. I could translate in the same way between the world of humans and non-humans. And that's what he really wanted to do. So over 8 years, I worked with Ombayek, participating in many of his rituals and that of other curanderos, recording his visions, healing songs, conversations, and so on. He also taught me how to interpret the language of the Apus. Apus speak through sound, they speak through temperature, they speak through the movement of winds, they speak through animals that act as their avatars. We fed many landscapes with, pre-Columbian landscapes and mountains with fruit and bread and so on. And he also taught me how to learn the biometrics, learn how to read the signs of the earth. What does it mean when this plant is sprouting double the size? Well, it means that the water underground has saturated the aquifer. What does it mean when the worms start to come out of and the termites start to come out of the logs? Well, it means that within 2 days there will be a flood. All of those kinds of things that he was teaching me to do. And one of the things that he really wanted is that he wanted a book he wanted a book that was going to do two things. First of all, he wanted these entanglements that he had with the earth, these relationships to the earth, to gain authority of something because that it was important to issues of climate change and also for issues of morality in society, right? And he wanted it to gain authority in an English-speaking audience and among global environmental movement, which I think was very savvy on his part. And on the other hand, he thought about it in a more sort of spiritual force-related way. He hoped that the book might eventually reduce the destruction wrought by the Canadian, American, and European mining companies in the Peruvian North, right? And he hoped that also by writing this book, that people would realize that in Peru, humanity was being destroyed. and that it would be, and it was like a warning for the rest of humanity to say, listen, unless you entangle yourself with the earth, unless you learn that these relational frameworks are the way to go, you're going to be next, right? So it was also, in some sense, a form of warning. So he's thinking about ways in which to manage this in now, but also what possibilities are there for the future for other people when they see the example of the destruction that's happening in Peru. Peru is the third worst country in terms in the world in terms of the impact of climate change, and this is happening largely well, in many places in the Andes, in the Amazon, but particularly in the north coast of Peru, where you have these massive floods. Yeah.
Thank you so
Thanks
much.
a lot. Sorry, can I add just a thing? I think that this partially answers the question of our anonymous attendee who wrote about, preservation of nature as being not being at the center, of governmental measures to resist climate change, but it's very, very much at the center of how, your interlocutor can teach us new ways to inhabit this climate crisis. So I was just mentioning that, in a way you responded already to our question. Citalini, you have a question, I guess, right?
Yes, thank you so much for sharing with us the encounters that have shaped your life project and for introducing us to your work translating the worlds and entanglements between human and non-humans. And in that sense, I want to ask you what have been the main gains and also like the main challenges for you during your ethnographic career?
Well, I think the main gains has been this extraordinary perspective of being able to see the world from non-human points of view and understanding how important that is for us in terms of our own healing, but also in terms of what it means for our relationship to others and to the earth, and to be able to really embody that through rituals and through experiences has been the most profoundly gratifying and incredible experience I've ever had. This experience of healing with others, but healing the earth, and also finding where's our moral compass nowadays. And I think this is where it is. It's in this interspecies relationality where we need to go. So I think that is maybe the most important, blessing that I have taken from this ethnographic career, right? The thing that's the most challenging, I think, by far, has been this demand by Francisca Colipi, this Mapuche shaman, right? Which she told me that she wanted me to write a book about her, but it was not just a regular book, but a Bible. And a Bible that was a shamanic, potent object, which could produce her rebirth, and reshape the world in the future, and change the trajectory of history. And it was extraordinarily demanding emotionally, spiritually, physically, and it expanded my worldview beyond other things that I've experienced before. But it also allowed me to really learn about how is it, the relationship, what does it mean that a book is going to embody the spirit of a shaman? How is it that the human and the object can come together in this way? What does it mean that she can change history by coming back again, right, in a different form, right, and transform this? So I think that was the most important thing, and in terms of my ethnographic career. And I had this fortunate and experience with Francisca because I've had these long-term, family relationships with Mapuche, in Chile and so on, and with, my previous relationships with Teresa in Peru. But also because they saw in me something that could articulate, because I'm sort of a person between two worlds, that could articulate something that would be beneficial for them. And I'm in trying to fulfill, I hope I fulfilled her request the way she wanted, in trying to fulfill this request, I've learned a lot about how do you manage these different worlds of spirits and texts and, bodies and different people, times in history, and how do we bring these things together. And I think, if I can talk about my book here, the Thunder Shaman book that I wrote with her, maybe that would be a wonderful way to bring that out. One of the things that I learned is that although Francisca and I had heard about each other, this is me and this is Francisca in one of our first meetings, or a long time ago, because of the Ancal family that were living in Argentina, and they lived in the same community where she was, and she was actually the midwife of Euladio and all of Euladio's sons and daughters, right? We heard about each other for many years, but it was only in 1991 that we met, and it was because she sent a message over to Euladio saying, "Bring me the girl," right? So I went a little intimidated to her house, wondering what this powerful thunder shaman, was going to ask of me. And the meeting took place in 1991, and in her home in Miali. And Francisca, she was 70 years old at the time. She stared at me quizzically, right? Her weathered brown face wrinkling as she spoke. And she says, you're a champurria, a mestiza like me. And your mother is from Argentina, like mine, she says. But you think like a Mapuche. You will dream a lot, and I will teach you to have better dreams. I will teach you about Machi practice, and you will work as my ritual assistant. You'll be my granddaughter, and then you'll write a Bible about me, and I will never die. And I was really at that point dumbfounded. What does this actually mean to write a Bible about her? And I said, I don't think I can do it. She goes, what do you mean you can't do it? You have to do it. This is what I'm telling you you will do. So there was a sort of a sense of inevitability in this kind of this project. So one of the things that happened is that Francisca's great aunt came from Argentina during the time in Patagonia. This is the birthplace of Rosa Curin, was right next to my grandparents' farm. And in the 1870s and 1880s, when the Argentinian army was exterminating all of the indigenous people during the campaign of the desert, she fled to Chile and fled to Miali, where she now lives. Rosa Curin was a thunder shaman, and she was a very powerful thunder shaman, and she gave her powers to Francisca. So on May 22nd, 1960, the most devastating earthquake ever recorded hit southern Chile and unleashed the force of thunder shamans, several of them. In Miali, the spirit of Rosa Curin struck 39-year-old Francisca Colipi with a lightning bolt and possessed her, thereby transforming her into a shaman or machi. And Francisca said, "My stomach fell as if they'd cut it off. I ripped off my sweater and my shoes. I was like crazy. My head was drunk. I looked upwards and they gave me all my remedies I should use. They got my right arm and gave it power. I drummed and prayed, and the earthquake stopped. I saved the world." Soon afterwards, Francisca had a dream with a Catholic referent. "I went up a big, thick pole to the Wenumapu. Just like on the day of St. Peter, the sky opened up and they gave me clover, beans, maize, potato, wheat, lentils. And as I was coming down, an old man with a long mustache said, 'I'm going to give you luck.'" So this narrative about Francisca having this relationship with this thunder shaman Rosa Curin, who is very prestigious, obviously granted her a lot of power and prestige in the community. But people in the community also accused her of a witch sometimes because she ignored some of the patrilineal norms. She was very independent. She had her own financial, economic welfare separate from that of men, as shamans often have. And so she was also accused of being a witch. And one of the things she was afraid is that her spirit would not be reborn in a new shaman when she dies, as often happens with thunder shamans. And in order to prevent that from happening, she asked me to write her biography as a Bible, right? It would be a textual object that would circulate Francisca's power after she died. And what would happen is that future shamans, she said, would smoke and chant over it, and then her spirit would be reborn. And it would also be an academic book about Mapuche historical consciousness and time and so on. So what I did is that between 1991 and 96, I recorded Francisca talking about her life, and she would often say, "Bring your recorder, I have something important to say," right? I participated in her everyday life. I became her ritual helper and learned to play the drum the way she wanted to and the sleigh bells. and did many rituals with her. And Francisca, interestingly, was also, just like Ombayek, aware of the power dynamics of writing. So she wanted an English version of the book that would legitimate her life and practice in the global textual community and gain her global recognition. And then she wanted to have a Spanish version that would just tell her story within the community and serve shamanic temporalities by circulating her shamanic power and bringing about her own rebirth. So these two versions of the book had different purposes. And so why I was sort of often wondered, why is it that Francisca thought that I could do this, right? Why me? And what I came to understand is that because she had mutable and multiple identities, she was a champurria, she was part Catholic, she was also somebody who was often considered a witch and so on. She was between worlds in some ways, and so was I. And so she thought that this might be a way that, that this Bible would be able to speak, store her power and speak to an audience in a distant future in order to bring about this rebirth. And it's a very interesting story what happened. In September 11th, 1996, Francisca decided to die. Her daughters decided that I should keep her headdress and ring in my house on an altar because I was living in a place of the dead, where different from that of the ordinary world. And therefore, I could take care of her objects until it was time for her spirit to be reborn, and then I would return them. What a lot of people feared that after her death, there would be a lot of witchcraft in the community and bad luck and so on. But the opposite happened, right? What the opposite happened. In fact, what began to happen is that there was factions between the communities, became to reconcile again. The community recovered lands that they had lost to non-Indigenous people. And the people, the community, also the clon, which is planted on her tomb, this is Francisca's tomb, it's lost the paint, but it's still the same tomb, doubled in size. They thought, okay, well, her power is here and she wants to be returned. And the people began to recreate her story again as that of the thunder shaman that combined both Francisca and the Rosa Curin in the same character. So they would say the thunder shaman was here. She was very powerful. She saved the world many, many times. She was bad-tempered, but she saved us from earthquakes and so on. And she was very, very old, and she lived for hundreds of years. And her spirit is now coming back. So when the community decided that her spirit would be reborn, generically as a new shaman, they then decided that I needed to bring her shamanic objects back, and I needed to write her Bible. So I did. I was writing her Bible frantically, and so on. And I went back to the community to bring her things to her tomb. One of the things that happened at that moment, I'm just going to leave here. One of the things that happened at that moment was that. Okay. All right, I'm not going to show that. All right. Well, one of the things that happened at that moment was that she basically started giving signs that she was coming back. We went and buried the headdress and ring at her tomb, and it began to rain, which is a really positive sign. There were a lot of positive things happening in the community. Her family got a lot of wealth and so on. And one of the things that she also started to do was to edit me when I was writing my Bible. She would say, oh, okay, well, the part, for example, of initiation, she says, no, it's beautiful. She would show me a nice rap, but you need to move that to the beginning. And she would also talk to me about people who had passed away in the community and how well they were doing. And finally, back in 2008, I met Francisca's great niece was in contact with me, and she told me that she was a student of history at the Catholic University, and she had opened a copy of my book, and that Francisca had possessed her. And then so she became began to be initiated as a thunder shaman and was practicing in order to become a complete thunder shaman once she finished her study as a historian. So she's in the process, and she finishes this year. So in some ways, the idea of the shaman spirit coming back occurred through the book. I'm not exactly sure how it did, but it obviously had an effect, which I'm very grateful that her great niece recognized it in that way, at least.
That's a fantastic story. Thank you. Before moving to your current research, I noticed, Italy, that you're working on Catholicism and indigenous community as well. And this Bible thing, I think, is, it's really interesting. And I wonder if you have questions about it.
You want me to say something about it? Sure.
No, it's Italian. Yes.
Italian. Okay. Yes.
I know you mentioned that the Thunder Shaman was partly Catholic, so I would love to hear a little bit more about how you viewed an experience and also how you analyze the tensions between Mapuche religious traditions and Catholicism.
It's a very interesting question because Catholicism has been around for so long in indigenous communities that it's in practice, it can be very melded together. So the stark difference often happens with Pentecostalism, right? But Pentecostalism often in these communities at least view shamans as being witches, as being, and the rituals as being banned, and all of that being negative and associated with the devil. With Catholicism, on the other hand, it's a much more fluid and complex process. So Catholicism is different from Mapuche shamanism in the sense that it's more focused on, humans are higher in the hierarchy of the world than animals and plants and so on. The focus is on the sin and the afterlife, whereas in Mapuche shamanic traditions, it's much more focused on there's relationality with the forces of the earth and the spirits and the animals and so on. But there's also not a focus on sin, but on well-being, on the well-being in this earth in relationship to others. Having said that, Mapuche often appropriate a lot of Catholic symbols in addition to their own in order to enhance their power. So it's an additive effect. It's not an either or. Right. So, for example, the indigenized virgin is added to the moon and the star of the morning. You have sometimes even like a complex relationship between practice. The Catholic priest agreed finally that he would go to all the funerals and all the Niatun rituals in order to bless the four directions with holy water. Right. I mean, so that there's this sort of idea of how these these things, come together. There's certain things that Mapuche don't agree with. For example, that Christ had to die on the cross. That the whole idea of the virginity of Mary. They're like, no, we don't want virginity. The whole focus is on knowledge and fertility and generation and so on. So, there's a lot of commonality between them. There's a lot of ways in which Mapuche appropriate Catholic forces and Catholic concepts for their own. For the enhancement of their own power without changing the sort of epistemological and conceptual framework that lies behind it, right? So I think that's one of the most important things. And also you have ways in which, the Catholic Mass, they go to the Catholic Mass, the Catholic Church opens the church for them to perform rituals. So there is a very fluid kind of relationship, with, Jesus, the Virgin, Bibles. Bibles are, one of the things Francisca used to do, for example, is that she would rub the Bible over her patient bodies and snap the pages together to trap evil spirits there. And then she would tell me to chew gum and stick the pages together with my chewing gum. So that then the evil spirit was trapped in the Bible and God had to deal with it. It wasn't her problem anymore, right? So there are the ways in which these concepts are incorporated into a very kind of indigenous, ontology of ideas of power, right? So I think it's an interesting overlap, and they have been, there are a lot of times the Mapuche shamans conceive themselves, they say, oh, we're like priests, we're like, and so on. And the dress of Mapuche male shamans, there are often people say, oh, it's like, looks like a female dress and so on. And they say, no, it's just like a priest. A priest wears robes and so do the male shamans. So there's a lot of sort of linkages there between the two.
That's fantastic. Thank you. So can you tell us a bit more about your current research in Peru and how, it addresses climate crisis, what Apus have to teach us about, how to deal with climate crisis. It's all very fascinating, and I leave you, to just expand in the direction you want to expand. And if you have pictures, we'd love them.
Yeah, I want to do the, I want to share my screen. Here we go. And I'll go here. Just let me know if this is sharing. Is this sharing?
Yes.
Yes. Okay, so what I would like to do, which maybe sort of encompasses this, is share with you my relationship with one of these mountains. I was at this incredible encounter where I had a lake and a mountain speaking to each other through the bodies of two North Peruvian shamans. And they were speaking to each other about the future of the world and why humanity should be eliminated in order to create a better world, but why good humans, right? So they create a difference between humans who are just exploiting the world and destroying it, and then humans who are engaging in relational engagements with the world. Good humans would come back as animals, plants, insects, and birds specifically. So one of the most important beings here is this is coastal Apus, and you see Ombayek here, and here is the Andean Shimbe, which is this incredible lake, the master of all power in the world. And one of the things that I wanted to share with you is this trip that we made. So both of these beings, Apo Cuculicote and Encanto Shimbe, this is Encanto Shimbe, the beauty of the lake. And these are the things you feed to Shimbe. You feed her fruit, you feed her perfume, you feed her flowers, pineapples. She loves pineapples. And the whole idea is this. When you're engaging with sentient landscapes, two things emerge. If you feed them well and engage in relationships with you, they will give you back they will give you back food, well-being, sustenance, good weather, and so on. But if you don't engage with them, you're just lacking engagements with the world in general and not recognizing the earth as sentient, then they will punish the humans and the rest of the world with floods, right? And here you have like what happens in a flood, right? With floods, with mudslides, and so on. So this is the way in which one of the languages of the earth. And these are the two curanderos I'm going to speak about today, Ombayek over here and Jose Garcia, who are the two shamans. I went with Ombayek from his house over here in Ascope all the way up in the coastal area where you have his Apucuculicote, which is a coastal mountain, all the way up to the Andes to Huancabamba, where we have this beautiful Lake Shimbe in order to gain knowledge and healing. And one of the things that happened, this is in 2018, is that we encountered a resistance from Lake Shimbe. When we were there, it was all the way Ombayek was going there. The lake pelted him with hail, with rain, with incredibly cold, icy winds and so on. When we got to the lake, look at this. These are water spouts, right? She was basically rejecting us in all of her forms. And Ombayek, he fell several times in the mud of the lake. It was just a brutal day, it was really happening. And so I was asking Jose, I said, well, what is happening? This is about 3,900 meters above sea level. And these sheets of rain and hail were plummeting us. And the issue was that Shimbe was seeing Cuculicote, this Andean mountain, coming as a rival. So, Ombayek has said, she tied up my legs. I cannot move. She's sucking me into the lake and she wants to eat me, right? And so he was turning purple and losing consciousness. Terrified, I screamed to Jose and I said, please do something. The lake is killing him. Now, Jose was trying to appease Shimbe with maize flour, with offerings of fruit and sugar and so on. But he said, shaking his silver rattle, he said, I cannot control her. Let us hear her will. And at this moment, Ombayek and Jose fell into trance simultaneously, possessed, Ombayek by Cuculicote and Jose by Shimbe, respectively. Shimbe was the person who gives pristine waters and health and healing to the world. And Ombayek explained, please to forgive him because he had come for healing, right? Cuculicote complained via Ombayek's silky voice. The humans are relentless. They mind me. First of all, they appeased each other. They became friends. And then each of them began to complain about the humans and the way humans had treated them in the world. So Ombayek, through Cuculicote, through Ombayek said, Humans are relentless. They mine me with dynamite and they take away my stones and trucks. They kill me. They throw mines everywhere. They take away my stones. It hurts, but they don't care. The noise is unbearable. Their sugarcane factories suffocate me with smoke. I'm angry at the stupidity of selfish humans who destroy the world for a coin. I cannot live in peace. I flood them. I send mudslides, earthquakes, but they don't understand. Their greed is infinite. I've lost my patience. Yes, Les replied Cuculicote, after the floods and illnesses destroy humans, we will have a better world. Oh, wait, no, through the booming voice of Jose, Shimbe replied, well, people here resisted the gold mining because they need my water, but they leave garbage on my banks. They basically do not respect me or any of the things here. They steal, they kill, they stink like the dead. Corrupt humans are the problem. I will swirl my hail, tornadoes, and illnesses, and humans will die, but the animals and plants will live on. Yes, said Cuculicote, the animals and plants will live on. So here what we really have is Shimbe and Cuculicote, these two incredible sentient mountains, talking about an expansive vision of the order of the world and the planet and humanity's future as climate change is ravaging the world. They basically say humans who continue to defend their privilege of over the earth and exploiting the earth and so on will be destroyed because they are destroying other species and they're inseparable from global capitalism and destruction. But those who are able to extricate themselves from this and move along to think about other worlds and other beings and being in relationship to them will come back as bird and insects. And here we have crickets and eagles and other birds, which are the fundamental ways in which good humans who engage in relationships will return. And I think this is a fundamental kind of a way of thinking about the world and tells us a lot about how we can overcome our crisis of climate change. I think our main problem is anthropocentrism. If we're going to be focused on human welfare and justice for humans at the expense of the planet, we're really going to be in trouble. And what the problem here is that we have these Western epistemological assumptions, right? The separation between nature as object and human as subject. Cut us off from the earth and make us imagine that we're the only actors in the planet. Our overexploitation and commodification of nature and so on. What has happened is we've lost our sense of belonging to the earth. And so what is going to inspire us to take moral responsibility to the planet and challenge this catastrophic climate crisis? Now, one of the things that these curanderos say is that we really need to decenter the human. We need to really think about the ways in which we need to think about the earth as a political agent, as a moral agent, and think about the ways in which we can engage the earth, as a total being. One of the things that has happened over the past, since 2014, when we've had these massive floods, right, and they've suffered the effects of extractivism, contamination, and a lot of these floods exacerbated by climate change. Here, for example, is the city of Trujillo. Is this change in the world? These local communities realize they've had the state turns their back on them. Right? They don't help them in any way. They give the mining companies all the things that they need. The church has sided for the most part with the mining companies because of issues of wealth. And so what do they have left of these sentient ancestors, which are really important forms of engagement with the earth? So one of the things I really want to focus on here in my book is not to think about eschatology and the end of the world and the end of humans as the primary thing, but to think about how is it that we can engage with the earth in order to survive for the time that we have left here on the planet, and then to think about how is it that we can reimagine ourselves in future worlds as insects, as birds, as snakes, and so on, beings that are in relationship with the planet. So one of the things I really wanted to highlight here is the issue of thinking about subversive kind of cosmopolitics. So thinking about these mountain ancestors, how can they practically and discursively serve as frames through which communities can engage in modern politics? How can they be a guide for morality and a guide for engaging the climate crisis produced by extractivism and so other things? And one of the ways in which it has happened in the north coast of Peru is that they've been these three movements for collective justice, ethics and climate justice, led by Sipong, which is this Apu Campana. There are these three movements that are really important to think about as having these mountains as moral agents, as leaders of climate justice movements, and as co-creators of this pan-ethnic world, which allow for a new kind of politics, where being in community and well-being means humans interacting with places as persons in the same at the same level. So that's what my book is about.
That's so exciting. We have a question actually from the audience. Karen asks, says that she loves your talk, research and practice, and thanks you. And she said that she often gets this question as a person who engages in research against anthropocentrism, and wants to hear your answer. So this is a question. How would you tell people new to the concept of the living land how to listen and relate to country, land, and non-human entities to develop and nurture a practice of active listening?
Wow, that's a beautiful question.
Yes,
I think
is.
It is a lovely question. And I think one of the things that we really need to think about is, are Western metaphysics working for us? And I think in this case, I think probably in the issue of climate change, they're not, right? How can we move, how can we talk to people and say, well, look, if you move away from the separation of object and subject, if you move away from this idea of human and non-human, if we think about ourselves as part of the earth, how can we engage with that? And I think the way of doing it is making people feel part of the earth. Here you see a group of people. This is Percy Valladares over here, who leads groups of people to engage with the mountain. And once you're at the mountains and you learn, you feel these languages of the earth, your perspective on the world changes. So I think active listening comes through active experience. When you have an active experience of engaging with the world and forcing people to engage with the world, how can you learn from this? And it also happens from disaster. I think a lot of us nowadays are thinking about the challenge of morality that we have in the world at the moment, right? The sort of the kinds of lack of ethics, the lack of preoccupation for other humans and also the earth. And where is that coming from? And I think a lot of it is coming from this idea of the need for accumulation, the accumulation of power, the accumulation of materials and so on. And so if you think about it, Western religions are based on this, right? There is the earth and then there is God and spirituality, and the earth is separated from that, right? The idea that our relationship to humans, humanity is often viewed as superior to other humans. So how can we engage this? Well, I think the important way of doing it is recognizing that we are only a part of the earth and nothing more than that. And that our experience with it is going to be our teacher and our moral compass in engaging with the world, rather than thinking about accumulation and all of those other things which are not taking us anywhere better in the world, and also creating a worse world for humans. The idea is, how do we learn well and to live well with others and in relationship to others? And I think that happens through our experiences and also our disenchantment with the current world that we are living. Thank you for the beautiful question.
Thank you, Ana Mariella. There are other questions, but we have only a few minutes left. And so while I encourage our audience and participants to maybe reach out to me so I can forward their questions and comments to you, Ana Mariella, I would like Citalin maybe to see whether she has other questions, so we can,
yes, just
have a last question from you.
To wrap up, and you have make us reflect a lot on our practices, and as I am starting my my work as an anthropologist, as a student, I would like you to hear, like, if you have any advice for PhD students interested in these topics and people who is interested in anthropology of religion, and in particular doing ethnography in the field of environmental studies and in working with the spirits or with non-humans, what would be your advice?
And that's an excellent question, and thank you so much for bringing up. I think one of the things that's very important to keep in mind is not to essentialize and exoticize. I think a lot of times when people think of possession and spirits and so on, they tend to view them in this otherworldly kind of way, that as if it's disconnected from politics, from suffering, from everyday world, from anxiety and all the rest of it. And it's not. It's basically the backbone of society. And I think that's a fundamental thing that we need to work against when we're dealing with the academic study of religion, because we have, because of this sort of like a Christian kind of base to it, the idea of people ask me, do you believe in Apus? And I'm like, no, I don't believe in them. They're there, just like taxes are there. You don't believe in them, but there they are, right? Whether you want them or not, right? The shamans respond, they're like, no, we don't believe in that. I mean, I can believe or not in God or Jesus, because that's an issue of belief, because I don't see them, I don't touch them, but the mountains are there. The mountain gives us water, the mountain gives us floods, the mountain gives us produce, and so on. So thinking about the embeddedness, right, of these practices, right, in the world of politics, in the world of economics, in the world of everyday life, right, of society. I think that's one of the fundamental things, and I think that notion of belief is being really detrimental, I think, for people who are working with earth-based religions, because it reduces your relationship to the mountain if you believe in it or not. And some people, it's the same thing with climate change. People say, do you believe in climate change? I'm like, no, I don't believe in it. It's there, right? It's a reality, right? And I think the other thing is that we have to be very careful with is the notion of what is real, right? Whatever is real is what acts as a social agent and has an effect in that society. So if Apus are considered moral agents in society and people behave with them as if they are real, they are real. That is the issue of reality, rather than trying to distinguish, oh, if we can't touch them, they're not real, right? And I think those two issues, right? The issue of exoticism and essentialism, and then the belief and belief in reality are things that we have to really watch against as we go studying these things and work against, because the epistemologies that we have, unfortunately, to study within religious studies and anthropology and so on, sometimes we have that in our language, and we have that in those ontologies, and we have to work against that and create new ones. So that's going to be your job, Citalin, right?
And I can say we are trying to do that with Gnosologies, a sort of, a recontextualization of what counts as knowledge and who are the actors and protagonists of this. So it's sadly time to wrap up. I wish we had more time to, have this conversation, but it's time to wrap up. Thank you, Mariella. And Mariella, thank you, Citalin, for your participation and wonderful conversation. And thank you all for having been with us. Please stay tuned on the activities of the CSWR, the Transcendence and Transformation Initiative, or Gnosologies of Dr. Ana Mariella Bacigalupo's activities and Citalin Sanchez's activities as well. You can find all the information in the chat box and on the CSWR website. And you also can find the registration link for our next Gnosologies event that will be on April 4th. Is titled American Cosmic UFOs, Religion, Technology, a conversation with religious studies scholars Diana Heath Pasulka. So we'll talk about UFOs. So thank you all for being with us, and have a great rest of your day. Bye-bye. Thank you.
cswr.hds.harvard.edu, copyright 2025, the President and Fellows of Harvard College.